Greetings everyone, this is the Rambling Collector here, and we are back with another manga review for all of you today. For the subject of this video, we will be talking about the series known as Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. Now, I have read and reviewed one of Nagabe's works in the past. However, it didn't exactly tickle my fancy as this series did. The anthology that I read was interesting to say the least, but some of the subject matter that was covered in that series was a little bit uncomfortable. This series, on the other hand, Girl from the Other Side, was actually very fun to read, and it was very engaging from start to finish. They've actually re-released this series in a 4-volume hardback series, or I should say re-release, and I absolutely love the hardbacks. They have this nice black leather finish with a gold trim on it. It is absolutely amazing to behold, and quite frankly, they look amazing on the shelf. And yet, this series alone was so emotionally impactful that I am still reeling from how it all ended. And I'm here now to talk about it. So, with that all being said, let's get started with the review. So first of all, I want to say this. Despite being a small series with only 11 volumes of manga proper, as well as a bonus volume full of short stories, this series features an emotionally impactful story. But, to set the scene, we have our two main characters, a little girl named Shiva, and a cursed individual known as Teacher by Shiva. We do not know his real name until near the end of the manga, but until then, we know him simply as Teacher. And it covers their friendship and their cooperation with each other as they live in a world that is afflicted between the folks who live on the inside of massive stone walls. And I can hear all you Attack on Titan fans already thinking, walls? But no, let me continue first. Anyways, but on the outside, you have creatures known as outsiders, or cursed individuals, those who possess a very demonic look of black skin with horns and bright white eyes, who appear almost soulless, moving almost without purpose. And yet, over the course of this series, we learn more about the outsiders, where they come from, why they are here, and more importantly, how everything started. But in between all of that, we just get the wholesome interactions between Shiva and Teacher. And one thing I will say is that Shiva and Teacher's interactions with each other were wholesome and fun to read along with, yet their story has a very tragic twist near the tail end of the manga, which I really don't want to spoil. I will say that much right now. I want you all to read it for yourself, but I will tell you this much, it was an absolute gut punch of an ending that left me reeling from how it all ended. But one thing I definitely liked was the world itself. It has a very grounded, high fantasy setting, featuring cursed creatures called outsiders, deities such as the Earthly Mother and Heavenly Father, which are referenced throughout the series, as well as kings and knights. And yet, one thing I want to pull from this is that it feels like there is a lot of Celtic mythology references here, or at least in my personal opinion. And a funny thing is, there is actually an anime for this series, which only lasted for about 70 minutes of an OVA, or at least 3 episodes if you look at Crunchyroll. But one thing I noticed about the dub is that they have all the characters speaking in a more Scottish accent, particularly Shiva and Teacher having a sort of different southern, or Scottish, I should say, accent, which brings my connection to Celtic mythology being referenced here. And quite frankly, I thought that was fascinating, especially the phrase here, Ciel a ruin, which means, run, my beloved. Honestly, this series, though, focuses heavily on the soul and its necessity regarding identity and memory, especially in the case of Teacher and other cursed individuals. Now, one thing that is brought up a lot throughout the series is how Shiva possesses the soul, how all the other outsiders notice her or call her the soul, the one who hangs out with the strange outsider, that being Teacher. Now, the reason why Teacher is considered more of an outsider, even among his own kind, is because he himself possesses intelligence, he possesses decorum, even emotional attachments like what he feels with Shiva, which, in my opinion, their relationship was very wholesome. It has a very father-daughter-esque feel to it, especially considering some of the things that they either are involved with or how they interact with each other. It's quite unique to see. More than that, though, one of the main driving forces throughout the early part of the manga is with Shiva waiting for her lost aunt. And while the aunt does reappear, she is not what Shiva remembers. She has become cursed as an outsider, but we see how the outsiders themselves, they change over time. They are given a purpose by the earthly mother who creates them. Their purpose is to create souls or some other task that is given to them. But after the task is done, or they simply have no more missions, they will turn into a tree. Which, to me, that's a very interesting fate. As in, slowly their memories will wither away, until eventually they become nothing more or than a tree. And, all honesty, that was a unique twist that I didn't see coming. But the soul is a very heavy focus here, especially with how it focuses on things of identity and memory, as I stated. Which, you might infer from this, that teacher himself does possess a soul, which is why he still remains very intelligent, despite his cursed outsider nature. And you would be right, in all honesty, but how he has this soul is a very interesting thing, which I will bring up in my random thoughts segment as I talk about the ending. For those of you who do not want to be spoiled for it, I encourage you to skip that segment if you don't want to be spoiled. But if you do not care for spoilers, please feel free to listen on. Anyways, let's move on to the next slide. So first of all, one thing that I want to bring up is the art style. The art style itself has a very simplistic, fantastical look to it, yet it also does not shy away from the horror aspects as well. There are some moments in this manga which are genuinely unsettling and terrifying, such as when Shiva is being chased by a cursed knight who is in the process of turning into an outsider, yet still has their intelligence and memory. And yet you have others, such as Shiva's aunt, who has become a full outsider, and you can see how she is fully changed. And not gonna lie though, she looks absolutely horrifying in the left panel here. Like, she genuinely looks unsettling. What would you do if you saw a figure all in black, with horns and wearing human clothes with bright white eyes, staring at you from the darkness, holding a gas lantern? Or if you looked up one day and you saw this massive antlered figure crouching over you and wearing nothing but a bedsheet standing over your bed? Like, you were a child seeing that. That is genuinely horrifying. I'm not even gonna lie. Nagabe does a fantastic job of illustrating, yet also writing that there is a horror action to this. Or I should say factor. There is a factor of horror and unsettlement here, which is genuinely fun to see. It creates that unsettling atmosphere, yet at the same time it never stops being wholesome. It will remind you that in this world, there are horrible and terrifying things within it. That's part of fantasy. Yet it never stops having that sweetness between teacher and Shiva, and between all of the scary moments. There is some mild action here, sprinkled throughout, which is very intense to see, but yet I love how simple the art style is. It's very detailed, yet it also has a very nice simplicity to it, which I really adored as I was reading throughout. If you don't believe me, just look at these beautiful panels for yourself. But with that being said, let's move on to random thoughts. So the funny thing is, I've actually been reading a book on Celtic mythology, which I really need to get back onto, but seeing how there was an influence of that when I was watching the anime for this series, after reading the entire manga, which, again, left a massive gut punch, but I'm about to talk about the ending here in a little bit, but I just want to address the anime. Even though I only saw maybe the first two, out of 3 episodes that are in this series, I genuinely enjoyed it. I enjoyed that hand-drawn, rough look of a fairy tale that it possessed, yet I also loved the English dub. Hearing 2 voices speaking in Scottish accents, which is something very, very rare to hear, is differing accents in anime. Or maybe I just haven't watched that many to see the accents, but regardless, anyways. Hearing Shiva and Teacher talking in those Scottish accents really highlighted the fact that this takes influence from Celtic mythology. And I really enjoyed that. Celtic is something that isn't really referenced or talked about a lot. At least, not that I'm aware of. If I am wrong, please feel free to let me know in the comments. But regardless, though, I liked how there was that influence there of these mysterious horned creatures running around, called outsiders, not to mention the overall arcing plot, which I'm about to talk about right now. So it turns out, the ones on the insiders, they all worship a being known as the Heavenly Father, whereas the outsiders, they serve a deity known as the Earthly Mother, someone who is apparently located in the bottom of a lake in a very deep, dark hole. And we never see her true form. Yet, in history that is shown between the Heavenly Father and the Earthly Mother is this being of darkness, whereas the Heavenly Father is a being of pure light. And yet, that does not mean the Earthly Mother is evil. If anything, the Heavenly Father was the one who was evil, because while he possessed the soul of these beings, the Heavenly Mother had control over the body. Hence, when the soul was extracted, they become these outsiders. They become cursed individuals, because now the Earthly Mother has the souls in order to prevent the Heavenly Father from getting his body back, which the insiders were more than happy to do through sacrifice of Shiva, no less. Now let me tell you, that alone was a definite shocker throughout the series, but especially after realizing that Shiva herself was cursed. She was slowly turning dark, and Teacher making that sacrifice of his to give her the soul within himself, to allow her to be cured and be safe from the curse's effect, that way she herself would not become an outsider. It was genuinely heartrending to read that part, and seeing Teacher afterwards having no memories of her or all their time spent together really hurt. But then it just gets even worse, because then we actually learned about Teacher's background as a simple doctor known as Albert, who lived on the inside of the walls with a wife and child, whom he still carries a locket of in his cursed outsider form. He has a vague memory of them, but he cannot recall them for the life of him. He cannot remember their faces and what they look like. And for the longest time, I actually thought that Shiva might have been that lost child of Albert's. But no, it's even more convoluted than that. Shiva herself, being an outsider all along, and having Teacher's soul, or Albert's soul, within him as a cursed outsider, and the fact that when she finally gave the soul back to allow him to remember, he did not become human, but she became an outsider. And to be quite honest with you, the ending of it all, how Albert himself had to make that choice of whether he should retake the soul and allow Shiva to once again become from this outsider that she was into the Shiva that he knew. The choice of that, and yet also learning that Shiva's form might not return to what it once was, because the soul between Albert had been passed around so often now that it was little more than almost dust. It was barely a solid crystal anymore, as it was shown when he pried open his own body. When at first he showed it, it was a small, withered crystal. Now it was little more than dust. And having the fact of the open interpretation of whether Shiva is inside of Albert's mind, or whether Shiva was reformed, but she did not have enough of a physical body to remain, and is now this invisible figure running around with Teacher. To be quite honest with you, it really left a hole in my heart reading that. And this sad or mixed bag of an ending definitely impacted me hard. Like, it felt like a gut punch after I finished reading it. But regardless, though, it was a very impactful ending, and I really enjoyed it. But at the same time, it felt like it really came out of nowhere. It really honestly did. Which is why I had to dock a couple of points from my final review of it because of this. Regardless, though, let's move on to the final score. Overall, I'd have to give Girl from the Other Side, the entire series as a whole, a solid 8 out of 10 I feel comfortable with, for its amazing story, despite how the ending occurred, but also the amazing artwork, the amount of passion that was put into so short of a series that you feel it even after reading it. And in my personal opinion, I feel like the hardbacks are definitely worth your time. Now, if you want a cheaper buy, go for the paperbacks. Like I said, there's only 11 of them out. As well as the 12th, which just contains a lot of short stories, but regardless, if you want something that looks good on the shelf, or if you at least have a penny to spare, go ahead and buy the hardbacks. I promise you, you will not regret it, and you will get more story for your buck. I promise you that. But overall, if you want to see a story that has elements of Celtic mythology with it, or if you want to see the wholesome bond between Shiva and Teacher yourself, or if you're just curious to read this story for yourself, if you're looking for a bit of a fantasy itch, please feel free to check out Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. I gotta tell you guys, this was honestly a really fun series to talk about, and I cannot wait for the next manga review I do. If you guys are curious, I have covered a bunch of other manga in the past, which I will leave a link to the playlist at the end of this video. Or, if you are curious for something else, I have also done an unofficial narration of the Spice and Wolf light novels by Isuna Hasakura. And if you want to check that out, I will leave a link to that playlist as well to see if you would like me to continue that series, which I have planned for this year, yet I want to hear your all's thoughts if I should or not. Granted, thank you all so much for listening. It really warms my heart that you would stay to the end of this video. And if you like this video, feel free to leave a like, comment your thoughts on it down below, or subscribe if you're curious for future content that I may make. And if you have any manga recommendations that you want to shoot my way, please feel free to do so. I will give them a look and see if I will give them a review. And if you're curious about that, always stick around. You never know, I just might surprise you. Anyways, thank you all once again for listening. This is Rambling Collector, signing off for now. Have a great day, fellow readers, and I will see you all in the next video.